Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth with, as you already know, your host, Peter Robbins. We are broadcasting on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. And in order to listen or watch live, just go to kgradb.com every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and click on live stream at the top of the page and you are there. You can also listen to past shows at kgradb.com/Meanwhile Here on Earth with a dash between each word, / or on Spreaker.com. Those of you that were watching last week or listening know that our guest was Linda Corteil, the central figure in Bud Hopkins' remarkably well-chronicled abduction case, witness to the true story of the Brooklyn Bridge UFO abductions. I had to acknowledge that it put me in an unusual position as a broadcaster, certainly the first I've ever been in quite like it, where my guest was somebody who I worked with as Bud Hopkins' assistant all those years ago on an investigation that took 5 years. I think last week I said 6. It was a 5-year investigation. And Linda, as many of you know, was taken from her apartment in Lower Manhattan, this being the top of it, this being a drawing of it from one of the eyewitnesses, and of Linda being floated out of her 12th floor window and into a waiting craft. The book is sensational, and it was really interesting last week having Linda on and on details. Because I had not reread the book in many years, even though I labored hard to help get the material together. After the third time that she corrected me on something, I thought, I think I really need to reread this book. And so I am now, and taking notes as I go. And it's an amazing experience to go through it a second time, so to say. Linda is also rereading the book. But I wanted to let you know that for whatever reasons, there's something about her story and Linda herself that resonated with more viewers and listeners than any guest that I have had in well over 100 shows. I received dozens and dozens and dozens of all positive responses. No, there was one, I don't believe it. And that person is entitled to their opinion. But she will be back as a guest probably sometime this spring. And I will be looking forward to that, as I hope you will too. So tonight, Bob McGwier and LaLa Bright are a true UFO paranormal power couple who were thrown together by the phenomena itself. LaLa is a psychic medium, experiencer, and UFO abductee. Bob is a scientist and engineer with internationally recognized credentials. We're going to spend the first hour of the show, or most of it, getting to know them and learning how they became the people that they are. The second hour, well, you will see, and see quite literally. We have a lot to talk about. Bob McGwier and LaLa Bright, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Hi. Peter, I'm so happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you both here. As you became kind of a presence in my uh, social network world, it's just more and more interested in not just what you were telling people and showing people and teaching people, but again, how you became the people you are. And what I'd like to do is just go back and forth for a while and start with you, LaLa, and ask you first, where were you born?
I was born in Baltimore, Maryland. My dad's from Baltimore, and my mom's from Long Island, Glen Cove, New York. So
What did your parents do?
my mom was a history teacher for about 20 years, and then she got her master's degree and became a school counselor. And my dad was a federal food inspector for the government.
Wow. And any siblings?
No, just me.
Okay. Bob, where were you born?
I was born in Lebanon, Tennessee.
Big family, small family?
It's a pretty big family. I had many great uncles and great aunts. I had one uncle and aunt. I had two siblings and then two step siblings. So I have the five boys my mother and stepfather had to put up with.
Did you, as a boy, were you interested in science as a kid, or was your head filled with other things?
So that is an interesting story. If you don't mind me going into it, I'll go into it.
Please do.
Before I was one, I had cerebral encephalitis. And the cerebral encephalitis, the doctor came and told my mother I would die or be a vegetable. I could not possibly be okay because the high fever had been there for a while. And within days, the doctor says, we tried ice in the stomach, but I don't know how it worked, but he's making a miraculous recovery. So I went on. We moved to the state of Alabama, where my parents joined my father's mother and father in a furniture business in a small town in southwest Alabama called Grove Hill in Clark County. And I was there all the way through high school. So at age 3, by the way, I had a real honest to goodness memory of at 1 year old driving up to our new house in Grove Hill. I can still remember it like it was yesterday. And at age 3, I woke up one morning, walked out, and my mother and her best friend were drinking coffee. And I demonstrated to them quickly in a few minutes that somehow, miraculously, I had learned to read. By age 10, I was into every kind of science.
Let me stop you for one moment and ask you how you feel you learned to read in the manner that you did as a pragmatist.
I had no idea
Okay.
at all until I had a regression. Okay, and then I guess we can do that later. So at 10 years old, I just got into everything. I was into chemistry and built rockets and built a telescope and stayed out in the yard and looked at the sky all night and regularly saw weird things. So from there, I led a pretty normal high school life. I don't recall anything major. And I was headed off to college to be a medical doctor. And obviously I didn't arrive there. So now comes the most interesting part of that. As I was a freshman in college, I went to the same college as my girlfriend from high school. And we left school one Friday evening, driving home, which was 2.5 hours. And we arrived 4 hours after we left, with a missing hour and a half in the middle of the journey. 2 weeks later, I was no longer going to be a medical doctor. I was going to be an engineer because I'd been an amateur radio operator, one of the other things I did when I was 10 years old. And I went to Auburn University and majored in mathematics and engineering. And so whatever happened, I changed schools, changed my ideas of what to do, and all of a sudden I was off to the races, and I've been that ever since. So my regression tells me that all of that was planned.
LaLa, in speaking to people who have psychic powers, for lack of a more descriptive phrase, or are mediums, this is something that usually you are born with. Do you feel that that was the case with you? And what are your earliest memories of something going on with you, or that you perceived that was decidedly non-standard?
I think I was born with it. I think I know my dad had it. I believe my mom had it, but she denied it.
Yeah.
I think I was 6 the first time a spirit spoke to me. My neighbor, I called Grandma Cheyenne, passed away. So my parents went to the gravesite to look for where she was buried. And they were looking around, and I couldn't read that well yet. I just turned 6. So I heard her say in my ear, "I'm over here." And I went over, I put my hand on her grave, and my parents looked at each other and just were kind of freaked out a little bit, you know? And I know before that, I guess when I was 3, I would always have dreams of me on my back porch with UFOs flying over me. They were silver, round with a tail. And there were quite a few, and I didn't know what they were until I saw it on a movie when I was older. And it's just weird things have always happened throughout my life, all the time.
As a child, having this happen, was there a point that you realized that it's not even that this is a private experience or something, but I intuit, or I know, or I've had an experience where I realize this is something maybe I just shouldn't chat about with all my little school friends?
Yeah, I learned pretty quickly. People can be violent or just mean, and I hid it for a long time until I would do it online here and there, but the people wouldn't know me. I just did it to help them. But it wasn't until I met Bob that I actually decided to be who I am, to help people.
And for friends you read for at school, they made fun of you.
They made fun of me, or you know.
Bob, growing up, were reading for pleasure or going to the movies or favorite television shows, was that part of your childhood, or were you, basically just super focused on something? And I know people that didn't go to the movies growing up, or didn't grow up in a family where the example of reading for enjoyment was there, and watch television or read stuff for technical information. What are the impact of those two things on you growing up? Was there some kind of...
I was a voracious reader.
Okay.
So like my library looks like the one behind you. and it's full of books that I've had forever, and it's wide ranging. It's not just science and engineering, but I have a whole bookcase full of UFO and paranormal books on religion, philosophy, many novels, mostly classics. So I remember determined as a high school senior to conquer Ulysses. And it took me 2.5 months to read Joyce, but at the end of it, I owned Joyce. So I was a voracious reader. My parents encouraged me to do all sorts of technical things. So my grandfather was very well off, and he's helped pay for all the things that I wanted to do.
Lovely. Any favorite movies or favorite television shows that stay with you?
I thought about what movie really lit my imagination about people living in the stars, and that was Michael Rennie in The Day the Earth Stood Still. I remember every scene and every word like it was yesterday.
It's a mark of a great screenplay for sure. LaLa, again, for me, authentic mediums, it's fascinating to me. If it's not you, Well, I guess what I wanted to ask is, for a lot of people I know who grow up as sensitives or empaths or mediums, they are so involved in things they're generating, learning, feeling, that they don't do a lot of reading for enjoyment because their level of experiences they're moving through life is so focused. For you as a girl, were you drawn to any kind of special literature or films?
I would draw and paint. That's what I would do to just kind of relax and
Yep.
numb the energies out, or the feelings I would get from who I was,
Peter, if you don't mind,
Please
that
jump in.
that painting on the wall behind me is her having an emotional expression using her paintbrush.
Well, let me tell you, like a lot of your Facebook friends, I'm getting to see some of your work as you post it, and maybe in a different way than some folks. I've been enjoying it on a number of levels. My life was going to be about being a professional painter, and I taught painting for many years, and it's wonderful to see subtle differences as time passes in, mastering a nuance on doing that rather than making it look like that. And they're beautifully composed scenes. Are these things that simply are images in your imagination that you set down, or like some painters, I have no idea how this is going to end up, but I am enjoying the process, and we'll see what it looks like when it's done?
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but the best time that I create art is either when I fall in love or if I'm heartbroken. And I had just lost my son's father. We were together for 15 years. So I started to paint that. And it was actually a grassy hill with a little white ball at first. So
Let me add in her process. You can see her changing feelings, because she'll start the painting one way, wipe the whole thing out, and start over multiple times.
Bob, you have now graduated university or college. You are an engineer, and you do have a background in science. What's the first job that you get, as a young man in a related or your chosen field?
Well, when I was 16, believe it or not, my first job was related to my radio experience. I was at 16, the weekend broadcaster at my local radio station, wound up being their second engineer before I got out of high school. So it was just natural. And later on, when I figured out, or someone convinced me in an experience, that I should not be a medical doctor and became an engineer, it was just natural. I went to Auburn and my grades were tops. I was tops in every class, and because it fit. I fit. It was a passion. It wasn't something I was trying to do to make money.
LaLa, did there come a time, maybe as an adolescent or a teenager, when not that you understood the power that you have, or the skills, the abilities, enough to be comfortable with them, and then have a situation where somebody that you knew or maybe cared about, where you had a premonition or a thought about something that concerned you about them, that you may have wanted to share with them, and then thought maybe I shouldn't, or you did, and that it did come to pass or didn't? I'm curious to know when that kind of level of experience happened for you.
I think I was 15 years old, and I have dreams a little bit before someone I love passes away. Okay. And it was my mom's mom, and I had a bad dream about her passing away, and I told my mom, and then about a month later she passed away. And I don't know why I do it, but I don't like it, but I'm happy that I get to say I love you a little bit more, or give them an extra hug. But I don't always want to tell the person,
So Peter, when the first paranormal interaction between LaLa and I, she and I were Facebook friends. She was watched Spaced Out Radio. I'll let her tell the story why. But anyway, she saw my face popped up and she realized I was on Spaced Out Radio and I was a scientist and so forth. And before my mother died, she told me, your mother is failing. And after she's gone, I'd like to give you a reading. And, it's a little disconcerting. I'm a scientist and I'm going, she's telling me my mother's going to die and she's not dead yet. So anyway,
I said it nicer.
She was very, very kind about it. She was not harsh or brutal. She was very delicate, but it was clear. And so, of course, after my mother passed and we had her funeral and the immediate aftermath happened, I asked her for a reading.
You wrote me that your first interaction, that LaLa talked to your grandmother. She knew the secret name that you called her, and your grandmother's been dead since 1985. For me, that's one of those moments, as somebody who generally lives in the nuts and bolts world, where it's an aha moment. The inquiring, holding on to what you know person who, even if you accept this, there's a certain amount of anxiety. It's like, was there any possibility of some way that LaLa could have learned that name and wanted to, impress Bob? And I don't get how that could have happened. How did you meet on Dave's show, so to say, or how did you actually meet?
That was the first time we said more than two sentences to each other, was during that episode. So I was convinced before my grandmother showed up, and here's how. I'm an applied mathematician and an engineer. My doctorate is in applied math, but I practice as an engineer at least half the time. So I'm very logical, and I noticed that maybe because I was skeptical inside, and she can sense that, her interaction with my mother was straightforward to address that. She told me several things that only my mother and I knew. She told me several things that only my mother knew, but I could go and check. And at the end of that process, when I was prepared, she said, I see a little woman about 5'2" with curly brown hair with reddish highlights, and she's carrying a poodle in her arms. Already chills were going up and down my spine. And she said, and I hear a word. The word I hear, I don't understand what it means. It's Tweety. And Tweety, my grandmother called me Sweetie, and I couldn't say Sweetie, so I called her Tweety. And so my grandmother was Tweety to all my siblings. And that was the moment when I was just blown away. My eyes were full of tears. I had chills up and down my spine, but that was the moment of epiphany.
That moment.
Up
until that point in your life, you are living in the real world. You have studied science. You have studied pre-med. You have become an engineer, a mathematician. And I think you guys know, when we use the word skeptic or skepticism, that's not a bad thing necessarily. In fact, it's a good thing. Overall, we all have to be our best skeptics as we move forward in this sometimes unexplainable world. Debunkers, of course, are something else. They know that it can't be. How? Well, because they're brilliant, amazing, incredible people who knowledge comes to them. It can't be, therefore it isn't, therefore it's something else, therefore I'll pat you on the head and try to explain this to you in small words. So you met this woman, and everything that you thought you knew about the world has now just exploded in your face on a certain level, that you are faced with a series of mathematical or engineering problems in your head about stuff. And is this a momentary crisis or a real breakthrough of maybe there are laws to this? There must be laws to this. If I never learn them, I'll accept that. For example, in my 20s, when I started to read Edgar Cayce, as we discussed in one of our conversations, Um, I I was amazed at the accuracy because the record keeping was so good. But when I was not adverse to the idea of thinking about reincarnation as something real, it had been something in my thoughts for many months, roaming around India by myself with a pack on my back and understanding that not only did everybody not grow up like me, um, white, middle class, with a loving family and food to eat, but they weren't preoccupied about life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness. They were preoccupied about not dying, about staying alive, about keeping their children alive, about all that stuff. And that led me to understand karma and reincarnation more as you keep coming back as you need to. Ultimately, you can choose to come back as a teacher and then on to the next adventure. But what occurred to me at the same time was there's a law in physics here. It's as real as water boiling at 212 degrees Fahrenheit that governs the transmigration of souls. Maybe, but at least as a concept, that gave me something to hold on to. And, whether it's allegorical or not. So I'm going to ask you, LaLa, the division between the living and the non-living. Many people, even if they believe in a life after this one, or if they are a practicing member of a large organized religion, they're comforted by their beliefs, but there's always doubts, and you never know till you go through that door yourself. How do you see this membrane, this curtain between those who are not here and those who are here, and people like you who, let's say, hear at a different pitch or see, in a different spectrum, allegorically, of course. I know I'm talking in circles a bit, but how do you explain it to yourself, or don't you? It's just the way it is.
I kind of just lived it. I never really researched anything I do. But I know that the spirits, they show up to me like pictures in my mind, like a photo book. Or I'll smell a pipe tobacco, or sometimes if it's urgent, I'll hear their voice say something. And then other beings like aliens, they have a very professional, non-emotional feeling, and people that have passed have very high emotions. So that's how I can tell the difference between those two. And people that are sensitive like me, they have a different frequency around them, and I can just feel it right away.
Bob, as your relationship with LaLa grew closer, you had more experiences that confirmed your initial experience. Did you start to see the world as kind of split in terms of psychic phenomena, UFOs, life after death, reincarnation over here, engineering, carpentry, collecting, those things over here? Or did you start to think about a connection, or how energy functions, or the nature of the spirit, the soul, some would say, as possibly being governed or understandable in the terms that you were educated in and grew up with?
I can't tell you how unique my educational life has been. So I feel privileged. And I believe that there is a collection of equations that together you can put consciousness and the four fields and particle sets that are in the standard model together. And believe it or not, there's about a 15-year-old book called The Orb Project. And not in the main body, but in the preface. A scientist wrote a preface, and he said, consciousness is going to be something like this. And the reason we can't get our act together is we need to modify not the gravitational field equations or the quantum electrodynamic field equations. The thing we need to modify immediately is E equals mc squared, which everyone has heard of and knows. So energy is the binding thing, and information capacity, as measured by Shannon, is measured in energy per unit time. That's capacity. So the energy of information and energy in the sense of thermodynamic energy, they are together, and there is a modification he proposed to E equal mc squared to add the consciousness term. And that has fired my imagination like you can't believe. She can tell you I drove her crazy for days and ranting about it. And I know I was boring her to tears, but I'm telling you, it was just, it consumes me. So now my mind has been opened, and I see other things like Leonard Susskind has just done recent work with a bunch of people, Juan Maldacena and others, where he has shown us how to communicate faster than light using quantum entanglement and quantum teleportation. Now, there is a caveat. You've got to transfer a secret, the crypto variable, if you will, in an encrypted system, from the place where you are to the place you want to communicate to through space-time, through normal, less than speed of light. But once that crypto variable is passed, you can communicate faster than the speed of light by doing quantum teleportation between entangled particles. And that says to me, I now figure out how, say, an alien planet could be filled full of smart people that know this, and they could send robots ahead of them for 1,000 years and then teleport information to the robot instantaneously. And this has just been an avalanche. And it feels like it's kind of all things I haven't looked at in months show up as the first 2 videos in YouTube. And it's just like it's being arranged, and just one thing after another. So I believe that consciousness and modern physics can be put together. And there are many people doing it. I hope I can make a contribution.
I was thinking while you were speaking of something I had wanted to mention to you yesterday when we were chatting and completely forgot about. Really rather remarkable book, especially for its time. Upton Sinclair was certainly one of the most influential and popular American novelists of the first half of the 20th century. His book, The Jungle, which is an expose of the meatpacking industry in Chicago in 1905, 1904 something. I remember reading it in high school. I've read it several times since. It's horrific. It's brilliant. It's heartbreaking. And it was brought to the attention of President Roosevelt. And that book was a springboard in the beginning of our Pure Food and Drug Act. The reason I bring it up is because Upton Sinclair just became an extremely popular personality in America. And by the 30s was just had a great deal of influence. His wife was a medium. She was psychic. And he was a very pragmatic man. He wrote a book, I think it was published in the 1930s, called Mental Radio. And it is a fascinating story of another really interesting couple at a very different time in history. And it would be like, say, a Norman Mailer or Stephen King in terms of the popularity of the writer being married to somebody with these abilities and publishing a book about it. So for you guys or anybody who's interested, I highly recommend it.
May I add something, Peter, if you don't mind?
LaLa
and I
say again.
I want to add something. LaLa and I are working with Jimmy Blanchett. I'm buying all of this equipment he has, and the only remaining thing I have to get Jimmy Blanchett's gear on the air is the antennas, and they're ordered. They're custom and they're ordered, and they'll be here. So LaLa and Jimmy and I believe that with her abilities and Jimmy and myself transmitting the codes that Jimmy has been transmitting that act like a CE5 meditation and draw craft, we can use that system with this artificial intelligence supercomputer on the floor here behind me to build a two-way communication system so that anyone can do it, whether they have abilities or not. Now,
Gosh.
are we right? I have no idea, but we believe it. So we're going to work on it. And she's really ready to go, wants to get her amateur radio license and get on the air herself with Jimmy and do it. And I'm all for it.
It's a great idea. LaLa, the gift that you have, you grew up with it, you understood it, you're an only child, and certainly intellectual, well-educated parents. Did you kind of develop a sense of being in a safe world and kind of protected in a way to develop these skills, and then at a certain point in your life, relatively recently, step out into the world? Is that kind of an accurate characterization?
Very, yeah. My parents protected me very much. I was very sheltered, and I was told not to talk about it. And now that I'm out, it's a little overwhelming sometimes, you know.
Yeah. Do people contact you now for assistance, for advice, for counseling? And if so, how do they do it? And how actively involved do you become, or is it a case-by-case situation?
So people do contact me either they want to talk to someone they love that's passed away, or they were abducted and they want to know if they want validation. And I can see what happened and where they put an implant and things like that. And when they hear me talk about it, they don't feel crazy anymore.
Yes, extremely important. And I can't, as you know, overestimate the importance of being a good listener. You don't have to have any credentials at all to be of real value to other people.
I've seen her, Peter, I've seen her have an inspiration just to walk up to somebody and know that they need a reading. I've watched that happen in restaurants, in stores. It's just an amazing thing to watch. She feels this inspiration and she knows she won't be rejected, even though she's shy about it. She walks up to them and just slowly gets in their circle and tells them, I can give you a reading for your recent deceased. And it is an amazing thing to watch them respond.
No doubt. Before I ask you anything about your abduction experiences, LaLa, Bob, again, growing up as a pragmatist, an engineer, a scientist, the first time, not that you heard about UFOs, but allegations that people were making about being taken by the intelligences behind them, examined or as part of a program or something, and then returned. Was there any part of you that thought, other than they're out of their minds, such things don't happen, this is crazy, and I can't even be bothered thinking about it, so silly?
It is hard to sit next to her and admit.
I mean, before you met her.
No, I'm gonna and admit that I thought they were crazy. I literally thought they were crazy. And some of my best friends now were amongst those people I thought were nuts. And I'll just give you an example that probably most of your audience knows. LaLa and I are both now acquainted with, and I'm good friends with, Melinda Leslie. And the first time I heard her on YouTube, I thought, boy, she is really out there, because I was looking for nuts and bolts craft. I was looking for nuts and bolts craft as an engineer and a scientist. I had heard and maybe even seen a little thing or two while I was still in government. And I wanted to find out how these nuts and bolts things worked. And I thought these experiencers, they're just out there in La La Land. Boy, have I learned different.
Yeah. LaLa, as somebody who has spent a good deal of their life in that very narrow area of UFO studies, among others, not just about abduction, but a certain profile, and most often a certain type of being, and deducing ideas about motivation or what the program is involved in, so to say, have you felt that your abduction experiences have all been with the same type of other intelligences? And do you sense any ultimately motivation or understanding of why they are doing what they're doing and why with you?
I've had at least 3 different types that I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're just tracking me. I've been told that they teach. I'm O negative. My parents were O negative, and I've heard that we're tracked and we're taught how to do certain things like the psychic and moving things and stuff like that. So I think they test things on me and track me.
I want to remind her of the barn.
Mm-hmm.
So you should tell her about the barn.
Um,
Go ahead.
yeah. Did you, at any point growing up, talk to your parents about UFOs, flying saucers, curiosity about life in space? And if so, how did that parent or those parents respond?
My dad, he saw UFOs as well. They would follow him occasionally when he was out walking around throughout his life. And he was totally into it, you know. He wanted to talk about it. My mom would just say, "That's nice. Anyway, what's for dinner?" You know, stuff like that. So,
Okay. Did there come a time as a new couple that you had a UFO sighting together?
Oh my goodness, yes.
What was the
So,
first?
I'll give you the major one. This one is just absolutely indelible. We went out to eat dinner, and we were at a restaurant about 20 miles from here, and we were driving home, and I look up through her sunroof, and right above us is a clear triangle UFO. It follows right over the top of the car. And I say, "Do you see this?" She quickly looked up and says, "Oh my goodness, I've seen that before several times around here." And it followed us for about a mile and a mile or two or a few minutes anyway. So, and I said, "Oh, it's going back. Why don't we make a U-turn?" So she made a U-turn, and it couldn't have been more than 15 seconds through the U-turn. We look up, boom, it's gone. There's just no aircraft that can disappear that quickly. We were 15 seconds in turning, and they were gone. And we had clear skies. So this triangle was right above us. So now we see stuff. We see stuff reasonably regularly.
The missing time experience that you were talking about earlier, do either one of you remember ever having another experience quite like that that included, and very likely if it included missing time, it probably was in that 90-minute range as well?
You
Or is
okay.
that's
it happened a few times to me. One time over my parents' house, over their roof, there were 5 large orange orbs, and they went to the shape of a V. And my dad was helping me take the trash out, and I said, "Dad, look at this." And he looked up, and he went to this weird trance, and he turned around and went into the house and didn't say anything. And that's not him. He would have been like, "Oh wow, that's great," you know. And I looked up at them, and one by one they went away, and I don't remember anything else at all the rest of the night. And it happened another time. I remember I was driving on 690, the highway, and a helicopter shined its spotlight through clouds at night, and there was this huge ship. It was dark, like black metal, with, it was just very weird. It was weird built, and it was huge, like a football field. And I remember I looked down to drive, and I don't remember anything else. And my friend was with me, and she doesn't remember anything else. It's just weird.
And when her boyfriend was alive, she would go. She would regularly go out to say, "Go to the store," and he would be upset when she came back, wondering where she'd been for an hour and a half,
Yeah.
all the time.
When I just went to the corner store.
Well, if you've studied any of the literature, you know this is not uncommon as far as patterning goes. At this point, Um, now that you kind of get each other, that you're together, what projects or project right now that you'd like to talk about are you involved in or developing or working in tandem with others on or
Yes. So Grant Cameron and Lala and I are all part of a group dealing with orbs. And I did not know it, but Grant went on Jimmy Church and told everybody and their brother something that neither Lala nor I knew, is that when he saw the scientists and the psychic start putting up pictures of orbs, he knew it was time because he knew me and he knew my reputation. He got interested in me because I had been at the Institute for Defense Analysis, and he has had a bug in his bonnet, be in his bonnet about the Institute for Defense Analysis since he found out one of its presidents was on MJ12. Okay, so he's followed me for a while, and when he saw this, he went, "Oh, we got to start this group. Now we have the right set of conditions to make headway." And so he started this group, and we're in it, and we ran a 30-day project where he called in every person who had orbs that he could think of. And I can tell you, and Lala can tell you, he put together a database of over 1 million pieces of evidence in 30 days. And we put on a show live where I sat and flipped through the pictures that I had on my computer while Grant and others narrated it. And we did that for hours. And we didn't even come close. And there's other projects being done by people inside orbology. The project that Lala and I are most direct with is this two-way communication thing, because we see these orbs here day and night.
Let's perfect point for me to ask this question. Orbs as a discussed phenomena under that name have probably been in the lexicon and paranormal news for 10 years or so. I don't know exactly, but I'm sure it's a phenomenon that goes back. But, in the world of general paranormal studies, when I first heard of this phenomena and saw what I considered an alleged photograph, my first thought was always, my usual first thought is often the most everyday, mundane possibility could be it. It's not as sexy or exotic, but let's start there. And knowing something about optics, I thought, well, this is classic lens flare. Light gets caught, refracted in the lenses, and comes out looking like, and dismissed it as that until people that I knew, respected, had histories with, were reporting seeing them and photographing them themselves. And then 10 years ago, maybe, I was in the Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England, with a number of friends at night. And that is when you want to have a number of friends with you in that forest. And we had 2 large dogs too. And we were in a particular location that was relevant to us from the events of 1980. And it was pitch dark. We had flashlights and things. And I thought, I've got a camera with a flash here just for fun. I held it up and I took a picture of the blackness and then did it again. And then looked at the pictures. And there are what I would have to call orbs, and also what photographed as like smoke. And there were smokers among us, but nobody was smoking. And that was my little BCAD moment on, okay. Now, what I want to ask you two, from a scientific perspective and from a more ethereal perspective, what is this phenomena? And LaLa, what do you think they are?
I think they're just energy beings. I think some are spirits that passed away, and I know some are a type of alien. But I think that's how they travel, because they change forms. They do. I mean, we had one shoot down as an orb appear like a light person and move our camera, and then turned into an orb again to shoot off.
It looked like a light beam coming down on the camera on our deck, and you could see this shape, a humanoid shape of light, and it moved the camera just to make darn sure we noticed it. And furthermore, the motion trigger was turned off, so it literally wanted to make darn sure we saw it. And then we've seen these orbs fly around in the backyard. We have one fantastic picture we're going to show you later of an orb in our backyard. And later on, we saw beam of light coming down on the houses behind us. And some people might say, oh, that's a helicopter shining a light down, except there are no TAMs here. No one can fly here.
So, Bob, do you basically share LaLa's view of this phenomena, or do you have a more engineer an explanation in the world of physics and known information about, again, from a Western mindset, pragmatic point of view?
Well, naturally, I want to look for craft. So we would see these orbs in the sky, and sometimes there would be flashes right behind them. And she became obsessed with these flashes, and she started zooming in on these flashes. And the flashes, when you look at the video of the flash from one to the other, it's a portal opening, a craft coming out of it, and a portal opening and the craft leaving from it. And so this is a way they're traveling, and they can be craft. So you're going to see pictures that she developed from the video screenshots of the craft that are in our skies every night.
LaLa, we know it's now essentially as proven as it can be that there are people that certain other intelligences are more interested in than other people. And in almost all cases, it's not just that individual, but it's their bloodline. If it happened, if you are of a certain mindset or you have certain kinds of experience, it's something that they're keeping an eye on and tracking. And do you have any thoughts on why certain people are chosen and others are left alone?
I don't know if they created people with a certain type of bloodline and they're seeing how it works out, or I think that's what it might be. It's somehow we're connected.
May I jog her memory? She had a dream, which I've come to realize are memories of experiences, where she stood before what other people would call, I believe, from her description, the Galactic Council, if you'll call it that, want to call it that. Let's just call it that for the sake of argument. And she was defending herself and being she was with, telling this group of people with a big leader in front of her that she and her team could do the job. And I mean, this kind of stuff, I mean, how do you make this stuff up if you're not a person that reads about this stuff all the time? And the minute she said this dream to me, I knew exactly what she was talking about. She had been before the Galactic Council that everybody's read about or heard about that's in this field, and defended her and her team to be able to do the job they're supposed to do here.
Wow. At this point, is there anybody, out of total curiosity, because more often than not, if somebody is an experiencer and the other partner, lover, spouse, whatever is not, it can cause tension, anxiety, confusion sometimes, a sense of distancing. You two are just the opposite. You are literally brought together by this phenomena, which is, I think, a lot healthier on a certain level, and just that's the way it is. We are going to go to break in about 90 seconds. Any thoughts in setting up the second half of the show, which I'm going to pretty much be turning over to you?
Okay, I want to say that in the beginning, all I cared about was learning from her how the craft worked. And I had to learn really hard through things she said in readings and other things that I was on the wrong path, that my path was different from serving my own personal interests. And it was to work with her to tell a story to humanity. That was tough. There were days when we were not happy with each other. She was not happy with me, but I've learned I don't need to know about craft because I know they travel by a different way than craft. So I'm just convinced of it as I can be. So I would say that's it. You want to add anything to that? I agree. Okay. All right. So we're going to show you some of these craft when we come back. And,
Okay.
And we are not going to claim anything other than we got these. They're not CGI and they are interesting.
Hold that thought. This is Peter Robbins with my special guests, LaLa Bright and Bob McGwier. We will be back in 4 minutes. Stay with us.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Are we alone in the universe? The most important question facing humanity is on the verge of being settled once and for all. The Mutual UFO Network has been at the forefront of this journey for nearly 50 years. Our members worldwide are dedicated to the research, documentation, and awareness that will shape the future of humanity. Won't you join us?
It's not just a donation.
It's a warm blanket.
It's a bottle of clean water.
It's a roof and a bed.
It's knowing someone cares.
It's feeling safe.
It's a today that's better than yesterday.
Every dollar you can spare helps so much more than you can imagine. Please, donate now to help people affected by Hurricane Ian. Your support is urgently needed.
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
And we're back. Meanwhile, here on Earth with Peter Robbins and my guest tonight, Bob McGwier and LaLa Bright. you sent me a number of still photographs and clips of things that you have captured. Why don't you set up for us first what you were either looking for, or is this just something where you grab a camera and, because there's something there, or this is a regular part of your lives now? Set up what we're about to see now. And will we be starting with craft 1, 2, and 3?
So let me tell the backstory, because that's interesting. She is, as you know, a psychic medium. And we began to have a couple of experiences here in the house. So I bought these security cameras and put them up in the house, inside the house. So we began to see orbs inside the house, and our bedroom is flooded with them. And we had one watching the front door. And I'm going to restrict what I say to it. A being walked past that camera that we could not make out, and it said hello to a name both of us know well. It is a clear electronic voice phenomenon capture. It is Class A EVP.
It's the same voice that they had when they were alive. It's amazing.
Okay, so that was the kickoff, and then I saw a couple of pictures of people that had these orbs inside their house, but they claimed they could see them outside the house. So I bought 3 more cameras and put them outside the house, and boom, it was an avalanche. They were ready for us, is what the only way you could say. And they started doing stuff, and we made a ton of mistakes. We claimed the wrong things were orbs, and things that we shouldn't have claimed were orbs were not orbs. And we learned from the really wonderful people in this orbology group that Grant started. We learned from them. And Linda Thompson. She's been our principal digital forensics analyst, and she's a professional. And so she began to tell us what was real and what wasn't. And so that is now our practice. The stuff you see has passed muster, or I will tell you it hasn't passed muster, and that it's in the process, and she's almost ready to say it passed muster. So in other words, and then they're going to see things that people have claimed or this or that or the other, and I have supplied them with nearly ironclad proof it cannot be what they claim it is. So we'll leave it at this is anomalous, and I can show it's not what people claim it is. I'm not going to claim what it is. So Peter, when you're ready, you can start with craft 1, 2, or 3, or Black Knight 1, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. We'll stitch the narrative together.
Okay, here we go then. What are we looking at?
You tell him how you did it.
That was a flash. So the orbs in the camera fly towards what I'm supposed to look at, and they flew towards a flash. So that's when I know I need to zoom in and clear it up. And there were things coming in and out of that, and that's what it looked like close up.
So that's kind of, I would call it the weakest one we sent you. But look, the thing is an object, and it has been identified in digital forensics as an actual object and not an artifact.
Got it.
I mean, come on, look at this. Tell them how you did this one. Okay, so this is the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's we see this flash, and near the flash, by the time you get there and you capture a frame, because these are fairly slow frame rate cameras. So you'll see the flash, and you'll see flash one, and then you're a frame later, and the thing has already moved away from the flash. And you can tell it came from the flash because of the direction of motion from one frame to the next. So you take a line, draw back through the frames back to where the origin point is, and it's always one of these flashes. So that craft was one she blew up from the craft thing that came near the flash.
Do you have any way to, or any to estimate, or any idea how far that camera was from what we were just looking at on camera?
That particular one, yes, and I'll tell you why. We chose not to send you the one where it was nearly made opaque by the clouds, but we saw it pass through the clouds and come into an opening, and that's how she made it, was when it was in the opening. So we look up on a meteorological site the cloud height for that time and day, and we know from the cloud height and the hole it was in how high up it is, and given the angle, we know how we know how far away the cloud was, and so from that we can estimate the distance, and the thing is hundreds of meters across.
And what do you estimate that distance to be?
It was at least 2.5 kilometers away from us.
Wow, that's big.
Yep.
And was this the third manifestation in the photograph or something else?
No, this is a triangle that was near one of the flashes. This is exactly what we got, and I assure you, this is not stars. This was because it moved in the next frames, and it's a triangle UFO with 3 lights on the corners.
We now go to one that you have labeled orb and laser.
Yes. We commonly had people complain that, hey, your IR LED is illuminating dust, or you're outside, and she took a picture of me near the telescope with a flash, and there were 5 orbs zooming all around me while I was sitting at the telescope. So we determined to get one with no flash and no IR LED. So this is my i14 Pro with the flash turned off, and it is stacking images. So that's how it does its live night views. It's stacked images, but there's no illumination. So LaLa said, put this green laser. She's about 5 or 6 meters to my left. She points the laser at the sky and says, look up there. So I pointed the laser at what looked to me like the end of the laser, snapped a live picture, and it stacked a bunch of frames. And that moving object, orb looking thing, is what was in the picture. No flash, no IR LED. And this to me is remarkable.
Now, again, just for some clarification, LaLa, you feel that orbs are intelligences themselves, or possibly past beings, or that they are a life form, or I know it's an imperfect question and there is no answer that we can absolutely corroborate, but what is your deepest intuition, thought, feeling, belief about what these actually are?
I think a lot of these are some type of alien life. They move different. They look a little different, but everything's energy, right?
Yeah.
And that's just their true form.
Got it.
When we pass, we're just light.
I would hate, I'm going to bring it up because I mean it's obvious to anybody that looks at this. You can call it pareidolia if you like. There is a face in that orb. And
I am seeing that superimposed on the house. So it is between us and the house.
That's correct. So it is about, the house is about 40 yards, 35 yards from our deck. The camera is on our deck. It's pointed toward the house. And that orb was between the house and us. It was near the ground. And that face was as clear as it could be in the video.
And as we have spoken about, they are not confined to the outdoors. This is when you photographed in your bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tell them what you want to tell them about it. Okay, so I mean, look, we have these blink cameras inside of our bedroom, and we occasionally sit there, and she asks them to show up. And she's shaking her head because that's true. When they show up, they come in a flood. And she said, look, I see you, a bunch of you are weak. Why not be a strongman? And mom, dad, or talk my mother. So she one at a time asked for our parents to show up. She asked for my mom to show up, and boom, that thing appeared right in front of her.
So
now I can't prove it's my mother, but I've got to tell you, you see enough of the stuff around her happening where you see an intelligent response of these things to her request. And I am internally in my heart convinced that's my mother.
So LaLa, what we're looking at here is the back of your head and this kind of independent sort of soap bubble creature there that's photographing as white. Is that your hand on the left reaching toward it, or is that an illusion?
That is the back of a wooden chair.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
But you're very close to that. And is it just sort of floating and moving a little bit, or just non-threatening and you not threatening it?
Right. So the spirits of our family, they hover very close from what we've seen anyway. And sometimes they'll shoot right past our faces and where it looks like they're going into us, you know?
I can tell you I've correlated the following. An orb will show up in the camera, and right at that moment, I will see in my closed eye vision a image of her father in his little tam cap. And it just happens every time, Peter. All I'm claiming is there's correlation. I'm not claiming anything other than that, because as a scientist, that's the most I can claim. And no, when the orb is there and I see her father with his little tam cap on, it happens time after time. How many flips of the coin do you say heads or tails? It is or it isn't, until the probability of it isn't is so low it's vanishing.
We are going to take a look at track 1 now, unless you'd like to go to something else.
No, track 1's fine.
Okay, here we go. Wow.
Okay, so we were driving home, and we saw the moon. And as you can see, anyone who's ever visited her Twitter account or Facebook page.
That's a great shot.
She has one great photo after another. And Peter, she's magical. I'll be driving 35 miles an hour. She'll just whip the camera up and go click. And what comes out is this unbelievable, instantaneous, awesome composition. The one she does in the woods, the one she does in the sunset. They are all taken from a moving car window. Okay, so this time I decided to stop. We stopped, and we saw the moon right above, and that image right above the railroad crossing. And she stuck the phone up to the windshield and took a picture. There was no flash, so the flash is off. And the metadata on the image tells you there was no flash. So this showed up, and in the next photo.
Well, before we go into the next one, first.
Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing. There's a graveyard. There's a graveyard to our right.
Isn't there always? I know a handful of people that can do this or have done it. Of take a picture there, and nothing special or discernible it is, and there it is on the negative in the print when you finally see it. So basically, the way I interpret this, without any analysis or, with your story, is that curved line that kind of loops in on itself at the end. That is something moving within the frame in that one moment of taking the picture, which is probably less than a second. So we have that much movement, and if it's moving that fast and it's that small, the chances are we would not have seen it. But a fascinating photograph. Track 2.
And with track 2, you can see that it's moved above the moon and changed.
Oh, gee.
Okay, so I want to tell you that Linda Thompson has been doing digital forensics on this. She's not ready to declare everything, but 3 others have declared that it's not possible for this to be a lens flare, that it's actually an object, it's not a reflection, etc. We told them the conditions, and to the best of our ability, we have accounted for all light sources, and this is not due to one of them. Linda is not ready to declare that it's an object. So she is still in her final process. She's been busy for 3 days and hasn't been able to look at it. Okay, but she'll complete it, and I'll tell everybody on our social media accounts what she found. But anyway, so we got 2 with the object, And the last one is the last photo she took. She takes a series of photos to try to get a good one. And the last one, it's gone.
Okay. This one, again, before we go on, I'm really fascinated by it. It could be interpreted as the side of an oval with lights on it. Be that as it may, about how many seconds passed between taking the first photo and this photo? Like a bing bing?
It was like click, click, click. So she wanted 3.
Got it. Okay. Here we go to number 3.
And now it's gone.
Number 2. Number 3.
And the only thing you see is hand motion. And you'll notice there's no lens flares from those lights.
Nope.
There's no lights on in the truck. She's on the passenger side, and her windscreen is not being illuminated by any lights, and there's no flash. So we are in our hearts convinced this is an actual energy of some type.
Well, it's that or a structured craft. We can't tell with what we have here, but very briefly again, 1, 2, and 3 in sequence. Streak.
Okay. All right. So I believe we have the video of this. That will be the Streak movie. But anyway, this is a single frame in a video we sent you, and this just passed right above her head. I mean, you have to, if you blink in the video, you'll miss it. So what it is this is a fairly low frame rate. It's 30 frames per second, and the thing was moving so fast that in a 30th of a second, that's the path it led as it went across her head.
That's fast.
We have different shaped orbs. We have a pointy egg shape. We have the round. We have the long, and we have the exclamation. I mean, they come as different things.
But we recognize them when they show up. Oh, there's Checkmark, or there's Egghead, or whatever. We called one of them Fraggle Rock and another one Garfield.
After a while, I mean, it occurs to me that what's exotic for one person is mundane and everyday for the next person.
It's mundane, but I can tell you, neither of us feel 1 ounce of fear or angst.
Maybe not mundane.
We can feel when something's there, but we're not upset.
Good. Given your options. Okay, this is Caudate Putamen.
Okay, all right. So can we save that one for last?
Of course. We have Black Knight front, Black Knight right, and it looks like that's all we have.
Okay, that's good. So there were these orbs pointing out flashes. They happened 3 weeks apart. She zoomed in on what she thought was a craft in each of those independent videos. The first one is on the first day. The second one is on the day 3 weeks later. And if you have a geometric imagination, you'll be able to easily make out. It took me a little bit, but I can make out. One is a 90-degree rotation of the other. The craft showed up twice on 3 weeks apart.
Do you live in a subdivision, the countryside, a fairly, tight-packed neighborhood? What's the kind of landscape, so to say, where you live?
Let's say it's country. We are surrounded by country. That's one. But the community is a gated community.
Got it. Okay.
Stacked up houses it's surrounded by woods.
Got it.
We are 1.5 miles off the highway.
Oh, okay. Very good.
And we're right near Chesapeake Bay. I mean, we 2 minutes and we're eating in a restaurant on the bay.
Oh, I'm dying. Order me
seafood twice a week.
Soft shell crab, please. Oh. Big envelope. Lots of dry ice. Okay, Black Knight front. Here we go.
So that and there it is. So we didn't know what it was. So we put this image up and the other one inside of a group, and 2 separate people wrote us and says, "Oh, that's the Black Knight." So that's why we call it that. We didn't have a clue. But anyway, that's the front of it. And you can see all sorts of detail on it. Like I think what I see, a viewing port down at the bottom. I mean, I'm just guessing. All we're doing is guessing, but that's a clear object. And Linda's forensic analysis says it's not an artifact, it's an actual object, because she had the whole video.
With that understood, where I see November 19th as the date.
Yep.
This was taken from your home by one of you?
But no, it was taken from our home by automated fashion by a security camera.
Do we have any idea, based on some point of reference on the ground, perhaps, of how big we're talking here, or no idea?
It's huge. It's huge.
It was way up there.
It was way up there, and it's huge. And it had this is another one of those things that the second one you're going to show came through a hole in the cloud, so we could tell, and it was many kilometers away.
That one was up by the stars.
Yeah, it was. There. We see almost all this stuff near the North Pole, pole star.
One of the aspects of intelligent control that these beings seem to be able to manifest technologically or with their minds is to, as you know, create screen visions or put something in front of us that we can deal with rather than what we're actually seeing, that kind of thing. But also that it does seem, and I remember quite a number of cases that Bud had where some people, usually a very small number or one, could see the craft and it was not visible to anyone else. One particular case jumps to mind when Bud was in Australia and meeting with somebody who had seen a craft on a very crowded beach and was just amazed that no one else was looking at it. One can argue everybody's having a good time, it's a beautiful beach day, but there it was, and it didn't make sense. Do you feel that if this was as large as you say, over a relatively settled part of Maryland, do you remember any UFO reports coming in, or do you think this was something that not a lot of people saw, or any thoughts around that?
This flashed in and out, so it cloaked itself.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
My narrative for it is a flash opened a portal. It came out of the portal, moved very quickly, and then 2 frames later, a flash, and it was gone. So it left through another portal it opened. And if I had to say anything, I would subscribe to Grant Cameron's theory of wow. The thing was wow for us. Wow, look at that. And because I don't know its motives. I'm just telling you what we're observing.
Okay, on to Black Knight.
And that's the same thing, rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And Linda agrees with that analysis.
And that was a flash, and then it appeared, and then it cloaked itself.
And does this have a date on it?
Well, I have to say I've never seen anything like it, and that means nothing in this work.
Well, it's certainly not aerodynamic. It has no wings, and no propellers.
It looks like kind of
engines.
A cubist painting of an old-fashioned microphone to me, but that's the way my mind works.
But if you'll look, that is a 90-degree rotation. The tower is there, the same place. The little bright bulb at the bottom, the kind of deck stuff you could see, the striations, the strata, and you could just see it's a 90-degree rotation. I'm a mathematician. I see geometry all the time. I knew it was a 90-degree rotation.
So I would ask them to show as much as they wanted of themselves in a nice, safe, loving way. And they did, and I'd say, well, can you show me again? Because I want to know if they'd come back. And then they did. Now, when I ask, they don't come that second. Sometimes it takes a few hours or a few days or a few weeks, but they do it. If you ask with your heart and have good intentions, they do it. It's really easy.
I now subscribe to that completely because I've watched her exert thought and request, and intelligent responses result.
Got it.
That's what inspired me to try to do this two-way communication system, is her ability to elicit intelligent responses.
I'll ask yes or no questions to the orbs in our bedroom. And so as for a yes, they'll flicker on. And for a no, they'll stay
on.
No, they'll be invisible.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And that happens instant.
That and you ought to see her with a pair of dowsing rods.
Our last visual offering for the show is, again, you've labeled it caudate putamen. Can you set this up for us?
Yes. So Gary Nolan has a theory. He and Kit Green did some work, and they were actually looking at trying to figure out what was going
just to
on.
cut you off for a moment, we're talking about Dr. Gary Nolan. Can you give our viewers and listeners
I'm very
a capsule of who Gary is?
I don't want to assume everyone knows. Dr. Gary Nolan is a professor of genetics, etc., at Stanford, and he has become extremely well known in the UFO community.
Yep.
And he is now admitted to being an experiencer. And so he has worked with Jacques Vallée recently on identifying materials from crash retrievals. And he has developed in his laboratory with his peers in his laboratory a device that will allow us to suss out what the material is made of and how it's manufactured. So that was my first introduction to him. I met him in Huntsville at SCU, and we discussed his materials work in some detail. But I subsequently saw this business about the caudate putamen, and he had done worked with a postdoctoral student at Harvard to do scans of the brains of people who had experiences. Right. And those who were purported to have had Havana syndrome. They were trying to figure out what was Havana syndrome. And they found a very distinct difference between one set of people and the other. And the people with the caudate putamen were universally high intelligence and had strange experiences. Mm-hmm. So he figured out a way to put a dye in the blood that would go into the brain and show these connections. These networks between those two bodies, one is the caudate, one is the putamen inside the human brain. Those networks are not usual. They are unusual. But people that have them can do unusual things or are highly intelligent and can easily put lots of different pieces of information together to paint a picture and to figure things out. They are very intuitive.
So you were saying relative to the what we're about to show, what was Dr. Nolan's involvement again?
He was the person who talked the postdoctoral student at Harvard into conducting the test. Now, the reason I bring this up for a reason. LaLa and I and Melinda Leslie and others are going to participate in a grant proposal to the Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies, aiming to prove scientifically through triple blind experimental design that people with these abilities, there are people with abilities who can communicate with the dead, and they can elicit actionable information from them. And the design is a little bit difficult because, as any medium can tell you, sometimes in a reading, they tell the participant something that the participant doesn't even figure out until later. So the design has to be extremely careful so that in the end, it will be accepted to a wide scientific audience. So we're putting in a grant proposal to take, and as a result of that, I've talked to Gary about having this postdoctoral student perform this caudate putamen examination of the successful participants.
Got it. So, ready to take a look at this?
Yes, indeed. So the glowing areas are the massive networks of neurons connecting the question mark bodies to the body in the middle. And so that's one is the caudate, one is the putamen. The caudate, the question mark, the putamen is the little bulb. Okay, so when you have these connections, you have high intelligence and exceptional intuitive abilities. And Gary Nolan himself has them.
Yeah. Wow. Where do we go from here in terms of the pieces that people like you, Dr. Nolan, so many researchers in the paranormal community, so many experiencers, so many empaths. Humanity at this moment is in pretty bad shape. I think part of our pantheon of modern myths, and it probably goes back to Jung's, in modern times, speculating about the nature of he would have called them UFOs or flying saucers, real, or are they some manifestation of the collective unconsciousness in the longing for a pantheon of new gods, because traditional gods don't seem to be handling. They're not micromanagers, perhaps. The toxicity, the problems facing us increasingly with population, etc. Do you see any way, as coming from two entirely different backgrounds, that we can, I don't know, use this community of people, or how should we look to them? Are they going to be able to give us guidance, or just observe with more feeling the mess as the water creeps higher? Any thoughts on it? It's not, again, a very well worded question.
I do, and this will take a few minutes. So in 2019, as the chief scientist of the Hume Center for Science and National Security and Technology at Virginia Tech, I decided to leave the box. I saw and heard a bunch of stuff about UFOs about to come out. I'm sorry, 2019. Yes, I'd heard some stuff coming out before then. And I saw Richard Dolan interview Chris Bledsoe. And Chris was interesting to me. His story was interesting. And so I wrote him and said, Chris, I'm a scientist. I'm at Virginia Tech. I'd like to come over and see you and see if I can't help come up with some scientific instrumentation that will help you prove some of your claims, because he was really being trashed in social media. And I felt empathy for him. Okay, so two or so weeks went by, and he wrote me back and said, okay, Bob, he says, my scientist friend Hal Povenmire has passed away. I'd like to have another scientist visit. Come over and visit. So I went over. And we talked for 3 days, where he told me every bit of his life story. And it was really detailed. I saw huge amounts of evidence of his being visited, and including the most unreal regression and this videotape done by a professor from Wake Forest, where a clear entity walks up on him. Okay, so at the end of the visit, Chris and I are out observing the sky, and two gigantic orange orbs, about 40 feet across, fly over the top of our head. And I went, wow, Chris is really magical. I says, he is something. I says, I need to figure out how I can help capture this so people will believe him. So I left and went home, and I thought about it for a couple of weeks. And I had a hitchhiker. It followed me home, and it did apports of water into my face. And I can prove that it was apports of water in my face. The roof was solid. There was no rain for 2 weeks, on and on. And I just went, wow. So I called Chris and told him that I was going to help him get his story out. And I did. I built a slide deck for him, and he went to UFOCon 2020. And our relationship blossomed, and we call each other brother now, in case anybody cares. Anyway, Chris predicts. And I know this prediction has been carried to the highest level of government, that sometime in the next few years, and there's an astronomical event he saw during his abduction experience that gives you the date. And the date is a few years from now. And the vision he saw, or the thing he was shown, was a nuclear war breaking out and the being stopping it. And so if there's a hope and that actually happens, That would be a great thing if they come and stop us from being stupid. And I can tell you, I had a fright here like 2 weeks ago. I'm not going to name the countries or say what was involved, but the system that Chris identified was announced as being developed by the country that fired the missiles in his vision 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, already I'm seeing evidence that he has successfully predicted the future. All right, so I left and we did our thing, and I went, wow, Chris Bledsoe has these experiences, and I could never have them. I really am envious. I would love to have these experiences. And then I meet LaLa. And LaLa just opened my mind up. Being around her all the time is this can opener to your doubt. She opened my head and pulled out all the doubt and threw it in the trash because I don't have a choice. I'm a logical thinker. And
understood.
like Arthur Conan Doyle, whoever it was, when you've eliminated everything but the impossible, it's time to change your original ideas, and because it's not impossible if it happened. And so that's where I am. And she is the reason I am here. I would not be saying the kinds of things I'm saying that will alienate my scientist friends if I were not in a relationship with her. And she's totally changed my mind.
LaLa, your thoughts on, as we move forward into a very uncertain future, how do you see yourself and people with your abilities, sensitivities, skills, playing more part in assisting us human beings as we move forward into the unknown?
I think because of TV and social media, people like me are becoming more normalized. And I think that will everybody can do this to a certain extent, right? And so the more people are open to it, the less control that the world will have on us. I just think that better things will come because of that.
That and what she does for people, she does readings for. If there's a way to capture that and show it and convince people it's real, which is the reason I propose we do mix with all these great psychics. It's just going to open people's eyes. I want other people to have these experiences that open my mind.
Yeah.
When I do one reading for someone, they tell their mom, their boyfriend, their friend, and then they tell other people. And it just opens them up to a whole new world that they didn't know, but it also heals their heart. So that's two good things, you know?
Often the case in the Western world, probably other areas as well, as children, you know, we have experiences that we can't explain, even if they're very explainable. We're filled with wonder about them. We go to an adult, a parent, we explain it, and they explain to us, it was just our imagination. You just thought it looked like that. You just felt that it might be that. You dreamt it. You, with kindness, with patience, because they're sleepwalking. They have no idea this is going on, or the same thing happened to them as young people. As a student, from the time I was in my teens, of the extraordinary work of Dr. Wilhelm Reich and the science that he established about how energy functions. I don't have to tell you, too, that it's not an Einsteinian model of dead space with life placed around in it in these little planetary systems and the like, that space between us, you in Maryland, me in New York, everybody that's listening and watching, is alive with energy. And one of the things that Reich had observed was, on a nice clear day, a simple experiment, you can lie on your back and look up at the sky. And as you relax your eyes, you are actually seeing energy pulsations, just billions of little. I see you smiling because I know you have seen this like me since you were a child. It's the most natural thing in the world, but it's unacceptable to Western science. So it's Brownian movement, or it's an effect on the retinas of your eyes, or what have you. And of course, they're not going to lie on their backs for several minutes until their eyes adjust and then talk themselves out of what they're actually seeing. This energy informs everything. And one of the things that's so important to me about Reich's work over the decades is that it lets me understand certain phenomena within a very scientific matrix, and still leaves a certain room for the wonder of how nature functions and how we tend to mystify it. For you two as a couple, for you, LaLa, as an individual, the things that we're talking about, this is day-to-day stuff. This is just the fabric of life. And now for you two as a couple, the more people go on in future without having some kind of epiphany event or a mind changer, like meeting a LaLa Bright and getting involved with the person who has these skills. For most people, again, they'll listen to you, they'll hear what you're saying, they'll hear what you're saying, Bob, but they know that that's, it's just not the way it is. You can't make contact outside of this dimension. When you're gone, you're gone. My father, until toward the end of his life, when he started to just think out loud about, I hope I'm wrong about my definition of what happens after you die. Being a pragmatist, it was everything goes black forever and the worms eat you. End of story.
Nope.
We all hope he got a big surprise when he moved through that door there. But how? Well, I guess by your actions, really, you can help people normalize this. People who are skeptical about UFO-related phenomena, if they have a sighting of something that really they cannot place into any other category, they can either rage against the universe and affect willful ignorance, or not talk about it, or allow it to impact on them and realize that, with all due respect, they were wrong about this particular thing. Do you interface with people sometimes who have had these shocking events and who just don't know how to handle it or what to do about it, or it's just thrown everything that they thought was true, into a washing machine? Have you interfaced with people like that, and how do you assist them in just, this is real, it happens, you're not crazy, the world is,
I think a lot of that is fear. I know they'll say it's other things, but I truly think it boils down to fear. They're scared of the unknown.
There you go.
Scary, you know?
I want to offer you an anecdote. It's a personal one. My children know I'm with her, and they see their father, who is a well-known scientist and engineer, started 2 major engineering companies that are blazing trails, and they thought I had gone mad. And she captured 2 videos that I went, maybe they'll even believe it. And all 3 of my children saw that video, and they had an epiphany. They now completely believed. And the one that I was certain, who's a neuroscientist and a neurologist, would never believe it. Her husband's a yoga instructor, and he told her, I can't wait to meet this one. So, I mean, they've had these epiphanies. I've watched the evidence change my own children. Yeah. And okay, they're closer to me and want me to be okay. So when I showed the evidence of what I was saying was real, they tumbled to it immediately. But this means, even through their fear, their father was going crazy, evidence changed their mind. And so I think that's what we're doing, is LaLa and I are just putting together, she has these unreal abilities to call all sorts of things to us and to communicate with, I don't know of a contact modality she cannot use. Okay, so it's just that strong. So through her abilities, and say my ability to set up toys to record things and communicate, that what we see with them in a way that they can understand. I think the two of us are together. What you said at the beginning, we're going to be a powerful tandem to help people believe.
I get that. To go back a little, because it fascinates me as a real world verification. You grow up the children of an engineer, a scientifically minded person. Was the mother of your kids psychic or in any way into any of this paranormal stuff, or they grew up reinforced with real world three-dimensional Western values and no talk about visitations from space or interdimensional aspects over the dinner table? What happened with them for me is quite wonderful. From the little that you've said, either through their experiences of or with LaLa, or changes in you as a person that your children would be in a better position to see, knowing you from the beginning and realizing something's happened to Dad because of this relationship. And you know what? We like it and we find it fascinating, as opposed to, who is this strange woman who thinks that she can talk to spirits and sees flying saucers over the house, who has captured our dad and is about to turn him upside down and shake him and get all his money and make him crazy.
So I have two children that are all in, and one is show me. One's from Missouri. So so that will go. And I know you've had experiences like this many times.
That's great.
Yeah. So we're I want to remind you and others, we have known each other for 8 months. 8 months, and it feels like we have known each other multiple lifetimes.
Of course.
That is how it quickly came to this, just enmeshed, and we are with each other. I've never spent 7 days a week, 24 hours a day with one person. And that's literally where we are. And we feel fulfilled. We're doing interesting work.
Yeah.
It's being shown. Other people are seeing it and acknowledging it. And now I'm moving my scientific brain into doing things that can use what we're doing here to do some scientific research. I'm delighted.
Now, for folks who are watching or listening, where can they go to follow what you are doing?
I think
website, Facebook page,
Twitter or Facebook is the easiest place.
Okay, so that's Bob McGwier, McGwiere.
IER.
Right, I meant right. Exactly. There's a bit of dyslexia there. I knew it was spelled wire, but I've got to change those last two letters because that's what I do.
Yeah.
And then
LaLa Bright.
LaLa Bright.
On Twitter and Facebook, and we post most of our stuff on both of those.
Publicly available.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're not hiding.
Any advice for somebody either who has similar abilities but is very uncomfortable with them, represses them, doesn't talk about them, hopes they go away, or a young person who is going through what you went through when you were young and realizing, I know stuff, or I see stuff, or I'm affecting things that other people don't. I don't know what to do with it. Any advice or thoughts for individuals like that?
I would say to not block it. If anything, do baby steps, because blocking it will cause depression and a whole list of things. Because we're here to do, we have this, so we use it. And if we block it, not great things will happen, in my opinion, and from other people I've known. I would just do baby steps. Read about it if you don't like talking about it, or find a group that you trust.
Amen. Go find Psychics Anonymous, Experiencers Anonymous.
You can talk to us.
You can talk to us. I'm telling you, we're not shy about talking about this. But one of the most fulfilling things that's happened to me since I met her is this orbology group. There are people in there who have never spoken out loud. And now you can see the palpable relief in them. And they don't want to leave that room because it's the first place they have ever felt comfortable. And you got to get used to it because they just dump their life on you. And it's awesome to watch them evolve from scared and alone to having a family.
8 months, boy. It's amazing how time, plays tricks on us. Last week I was in Manhattan, my hometown, for the first time since the pandemic. It's the longest I hadn't been there in my entire lifetime. And the moment that cab came roaring out of the Midtown Tunnel and the sign pointing south to downtown, I had no transitional experience. It was as if nothing had happened. I was simply back in the place I know best, rolling down 2nd Avenue, and 8 months with a partner whose just very being is transformative, is something most people just dream about. I can only say, keep us posted, on the places that you're working, so that we can continue to follow what you're doing. I also wonder out there may be more couples than we can imagine where one of them is deeply psychic and the other one is extremely left-brained, pragmatic, real-world nuts and bolts, who are quietly learning from each other as we do this show. As we head into our last couple of minutes here, anything that you'd like to share in parting?
Well, the thing I'd like to share with you is we did not show a piece of evidence that we got when we left Penn Station, turned and looked up the street over the Chrysler Building, and she saw the Phoenix lights and got it on camera. Now, we can't prove that, so we're not showing it, but I'm telling you, there was nothing up there. I searched the air logs, I searched everything, and the thing was right there, but it's lost in the city lights. And or it was a screen memory that only we saw, but it was caught on camera. And I'm telling you, this stuff is just, you begin to notice stuff you failed to notice before. Like I walked out of the door and back in the door, and I have these 2 videos of me walking out the door and walking back in the door. And it was the first time we caught something anomalous in the daytime. And it was so near the sun in these cameras that you go, okay, well, maybe it's a lens flare, but lens flares don't blink. They hang out as long as the object, and this thing blinked on and off while I walked in and while I walked out. And it's completely anomalous.
I'm going to ask you to hold it there, Bob. And LaLa, any thoughts for our audience in closing?
I'd like to add one thing, is the people that kind of hide from their gifts. If you could do 2 things: be kind to yourself, be gentle, and ask the universe or whoever you believe in for guidance and help, because they listen. Just keep asking. It'll happen.
That's great advice and a perfect point to close on. This is Peter Robbins. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. I want to thank our guest, Bob McGwier and LaLa Bright, for joining us tonight. And just to remind you to stand up for what you believe in, stay well, and be kind to each other. See you next week.